I found this in a book and it changed the way I see my entire life. One line, buried in the middle of a chapter, hit me like a lightning bolt. At first, it felt simple, almost too simple, but the more I read it, the more it tore through every excuse, every habit, every lie I'd been living. It was just ink on paper, yet it forced me to question everything. And that momentum moment I stumbled across itis, where this story begins. The ordinary moment that changed everything it didn't happen in some dramatic place. There was no lightning strike, no life-changing seminar, no grand revelation delivered by a famous speaker. It happened in the quiet, on a day I could have easily forgotten, the kind of day that blends into the hundreds before it and the hundreds after it. And that's what makes it so powerful, because you expect turning points to arrive dressed in glory. But life rarely works that way. The moments that change you forever often arrive disguised as nothing. That day, I wasn't searching for answers. I wasn't on some noble quest for wisdom. Honestly, I was restless, distracted. I remember pacing the room, feeling like I was moving but not actually going anywhere. You know, that restless itch, you want something to pull you out of yourself, but you don't know what it is. That's when I noticed it. A book sitting on the table. Not a new one. Not a bestseller with a shiny cover screaming for attention. Just a book I'd ignored a dozen times before. I can't even tell you why I reached for it in that moment. Maybe boredom, maybe instinct, maybe something greater pulling me toward it. I opened it without intention, no plan, no focus, just flipping through, letting the pages fall open. And here's where the tension rises, because most of the time, those small, careless choices mean nothing. You read a line, you forget it. You skim a page, it never touches you. 99 times out of 100, it's just words passing through your eyes like smoke. But then there's the one time, the one sentence, the one line that doesn't just pass through you, it burns its way into you. That's what happened that day. I remember my eyes landing on it, almost by accident. At first, it didn't register, just another string of words like all the others. But then, as if the letters rearranged themselves, the meaning started to sharpen. My chest tightened, my mind stopped wandering. It felt like the book wasn't just speaking, it was calling me out. And here's the payoff. In that instant, I knew I wasn't just reading, I was being confronted. That line held up a mirror I'd been avoiding, forcing me to see the way I'd been living. And once I saw it, I could unsee it. The ordinary day was no longer ordinary. The quiet moment was no longer quiet. It had become a doorway into something I wasn't prepared for, but something I desperately needed. And that doorway, it leads to the line that changed everything. The line that hit you. The sentence was simple, almost too simple. I could have skimmed past it and forgotten it, like the hundreds of lines I'd read before, but something in it made me stop, go back, and read it again. And the second time, it hit me differently. It said, "You are living someone else's script unless you choose to write your own." At first, I shrugged it off, just words, just a clever phrase, but then I felt it echoing in me, almost accusing me. I read it again, slower this time, and each word landed like a blow I couldn't dodge. You are living someone else's script. Think about that. All the choices you've made, the goals you chase, even the way you define success show much of it actually belongs to you, and how much of it was handed to you. School taught you what a good future looks like. Parents, teachers, bosses, friends, they gave you rules, expectations, labels. Get the degree, get the stable job, get married at the right age. Don't step too far outside the lines. Be ambitious, but not too ambitious. Fit in, do what's safe, do what makes sense to them, and without even noticing, you start performing. You follow their script, not yours. Day after day, year after year, the lines are already written, and all you do is read them out loud with your life. That's the setup. And here's the tension. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep it went. The job I chose, was it truly mine? Or was it the safe option everyone told me to take? The relationships I clung to, did I stay because my heart wanted to, or because I was terrified of what people might say if I walked away? Even the dreams I carried, were they real, or were they just recycled visions, hand-me-down ambitions from someone else's idea of success? And that's when the line hit me like a punch in the chest. Because it was no longer just a sentence in a book, it was a mirror that forced me to see the truth about the life I was living. I wasn't writing my story, I was reciting someone else's lines. That realization stung, it burned, because once you see it, you can't deny it. You can't hide behind excuses anymore. It doesn't matter how busy you are, how tired you are, how responsible you feel. The question won't leave you alone. Are you living your story or someone else's? And here's the payoff. That single sentence didn't just inspire me, it confronted me. It stripped me bare. It left me with no one else to blame. Not society, not parents, not circumstance. Just me, my script, my pen, my choice. That's the power of words. Sometimes they don't pat you on the back. Sometimes they don't comfort you. Sometimes, like this line, they grab you by the collar and demand an answer. Because once you see the script you've been living, you can't unsee it. And from that moment forward, you either keep reading the lines that were written for you or you take the pen back. Looking back at the old script, the moment you read a line like that, something happens you can't help but turn around and start replaying your past. Suddenly, every choice, every pattern, every decision looks different. You don't see it with pride anymore. You see it with sharper eyes, maybe even shame. That's exactly what happened to me. I started asking, whose script have I really been living? And that's when memories began resurfacing. The years I spent working long hours at a job that drained me. Back then, I told myself I was being responsible. But looking back, I see the truth he was being obedient. Obedient to an idea of stability that wasn't mine, but theirs. I wasn't building a life. I was performing one. Think about your own life for a second. How many times have you chased achievements you didn't even want just because they looked good on someone else's scoreboard? Maybe you went to college, not because you had a burning passion, but because you were told it was the right thing. Maybe you stayed in a relationship not because your heart was in it, but because the world told you it was safer than being alone. Maybe you bought things, posted things, said things not because they reflected you, but because they fit the script of who you thought you were supposed to be. That's the setup, the brutal realization that so much of your past may not have been authored by you at all. Now here's the tension. Once you see it, the guilt creeps in. You start counting the years, the wasted hours, the missed chances. You realize how much of your life has been lived for someone else's approval, and that hurts more than failure ever could because at least failure is yours. But living someone else's life, that's like waking up one day and realizing you've been on stage for years, performing lines you never wrote in a play you never auditioned for, and the audience, half the time, they weren't even watching. That's what makes it tragic. You sacrifice your fire, your freedom, your dream just to impress people who don't even notice, or worse, don't even care. And yet, you keep going. Because once you've bought into the script, you forget you even have a choice. But here's the payoff: a line from that book shattered the illusion. It made me realize something painful but freeing. None of it was wasted if I was willing to stop now. Because the truth is, the moment you recognize the old script, you can tear it up. You can put the pen back in your hand, and when you do, the past isn't a prison anymore, it becomes proof. Proof of what happens when you let others write your story, and proof that you are ready to finally write your own. Because once you see your old life clearly, you don't have to keep repeating it. And that's where the real awakening begins. The awakening doesn't feel like fireworks. It doesn't feel like some overnight transformation where suddenly everything in your life is perfect. No, awakening feels quieter, more dangerous, like putting on glasses for the first time and realizing how blurry your vision has always been. That's what happened when that line sank into me. Suddenly, everything I had taken for granted about my life started to look different. The job I thought was secure suddenly looked like a cage. The relationships I thought were comfortable suddenly looked like excuses. The routines I called normal suddenly looked like chains. That's the setup, clarity. But clarity isn't comfortable, it's unsettling. Because here's the tension. When you wake up, you can't go back to sleep. You can't unknow what you now know. Once you've seen the bars of the cage, you can't keep pretending you're free. And that's where the real fear sets in. Because now you have a choice. You can keep living the old script and feel the weight of every compromise. Or you can tear it up and risk everything for the chance to write something new. An ill-be-honest part of me wanted to look away. Part of me wanted to throw the book down, convince myself it was just a nice line, and return to life as usual. Because life as usual was safe, predictable, familiar. And familiar pain is easier to bear than unfamiliar freedom, but the line wouldn't let me go. It stayed with me, echoing in my head, haunting me. Every decision I made after that moment carried a question: is this mine or is this borrowed? And that's when the awakening truly hit. I realized that for the first time in years, I wasn't drifting. I wasn't reacting. I wasn't just performing someone else's script. I was awake. And in that awakening, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: energy, a sense of possibility, the quiet but undeniable spark of freedom. That's the payoff. Awakening doesn't change your life instantly. It changes you. And once you change, your life has no choice but to follow. But here's the truth: clarity without action is just another dream. And that's when I knew. If I didn't take this awakening and turn it into something real, it would fade like every other spark before it, so I had to act. I had to put the line into practice. Trying to apply the lesson awakening is powerful, but let's be honest, it's also fragile. It's like striking a match in the dark. For a moment, the flame is alive, and you can finally see, but unless you protect it, the smallest gust can blow it out. That's what it felt like when I decided to act on that line. You are living someone else's script unless you choose to write your own. I told myself, enough. I am done reading lines that don't belong to me, and so I tried to live differently. That's the setup, taking the first step. And here's the tension. The world doesn't just let you rewrite your story without a fight. The moment you try, resistance shows up. The habits you've built over years don't disappear just because you've had one moment of clarity. The people around you, the ones who've gotten used to the old you, don't always cheer when you start to change. Sometimes they get uncomfortable, sometimes they push back, because when you start writing your own script, it exposes the fact that maybe they aren't writing theirs. And then there's your own mind, the loudest critic of all. Suddenly self-doubt creeps in. What if I am wrong? What if I'm not strong enough? What if I tear up the old script and end up with nothing? I felt that every single day in the beginning. The first time I said no to something that didn't align with me, I felt guilty. The first time I took a risk that scared me, I almost convinced myself to quit. I even questioned whether I deserved to live differently. Because when you've spent your life obeying the script, freedom feels unnatural. But here's the payoff. You realize the only way to keep the awakening alive was to take small steps, not grand gestures, not burning down my life in one night, just one choice at a time, 1 hour to think for myself, one page in a journal asking questions I had avoided for years, one decision where I asked, is this truly mine or is this just borrowed? And every small act was proof. Proof that I wasn't powerless, proof that the script could be rewritten, proof that the line in the book wasn't just inspiration, it was instruction. And those tiny wins built momentum. They reminded me that even if I couldn't rewrite the entire story overnight, I could start writing the next line, and the next, and the next. But just as the momentum began to build, a shadow appeared, because deep down, another question haunted me, a question that threatened to undo everything I had started. What if I fail at writing my own script? Wrestling with doubt. Here's the thing nobody tells you about rewriting your life. It doesn't just feel exciting, it feels terrifying. Because the moment you step away from the old script, you enter uncharted territory. And in that silence, doubt begins to whisper. That's the setup. You finally feel the spark of freedom, but immediately, fear shows up to challenge it. And here is the tension. Doubt doesn't attack you with full force all at once. It seeps in quietly. It asks questions that sound logical, but underneath, they're poison. What if you are making a mistake? What if this new script fails? What if you lose everything you already had? It reminds you of every past failure, every time you quit, every time you tried something bold and it didn't work. It doesn't shout, it doesn't threaten, it just plays the old tape on repeat until you start second-guessing yourself. And if you're not careful, that tape can trap you. Because doubt doesn't just live in your head, it lives in your habits. One missed day becomes two, one hesitation becomes a pattern. And before you know it, you're back in the old story, convincing yourself that maybe the safe, borrowed script wasn't so bad after all. That's where I found myself. I had started taking small choices, small acts of freedom, but at night, doubt kept me awake. It told me I wasn't ready, that I wasn't enough, that I didn't deserve a different story. And it'll be honest, part of me wanted to believe it, because doubt, as destructive as it is, offers something familiar: safety, predictability, the illusion of control. But here's the payoff. He realized that doubt wasn't the enemy, it was the evidence. It proved I was no longer stuck in autopilot, because you don't doubt when you're repeating the same script, you only doubt when you're writing something new. That shift changed everything. Instead of letting doubt paralyze me, I started seeing it as a signal. If I was scared, if I was questioning, it meant I was on the right path. It meant I was stepping outside the lines, breaking the pattern, daring to live differently. And once I saw it that way, the line from the book stopped being just advice, it became my rule for living. The long-term shift, the hardest part, is always starting. The first step feels like jumping off a cliff with no guarantee of a landing. But once you take it, once you dare to live by that line, you are living someone else's script. Unless you choose to write your own, something even more powerful begins to happen. Because as hard as it is to start, the real transformation comes from staying. At first, the differences are almost invisible. So small you wonder if anything is really changing at all. You catch yourself saying no to things you used to automatically say yes to, commitments you took out of guilt, favors you agreed to out of obligation, patterns you kept just to avoid rocking the boat. Now there is hesitation, a pause. And in that pause, a question arises: is this truly mine or is this borrowed? That one question changes everything. You give yourself permission to make choices that once felt selfish, but are actually necessary. You begin to see that choosing yourself isn't betrayal, it's survival. And with each choice, you notice something. Subtle but undeniable. You feel lighter, not because the world has changed, but because you're finally beginning to live in alignment with yourself. That's the setup, slow, quiet shift, the small signs that the story is starting to change. But then comes the tension, because the moment you begin rewriting your script, people notice. And not everyone celebrates it. Some admire you, some even feel inspired, but others don't. The ones who love the old you, the version who fit into their plans, who said yes without hesitation, who lived by their rules, they may feel uncomfortable. They may even feel threatened. They'll tell you, you've changed. They'll look at you with suspicion, with disapproval, sometimes even with resentment. And the hardest part is they're not wrong. You have changed. You are different. But for the first time, you're not living for them, you're living for you. Still, doubt doesn't disappear overnight. It creeps back in like a shadow at the edge of the room. But here's the difference. This time, you recognize it. You see it for what it is, a test. Proof that you're no longer drifting on autopilot. Doubt only shows up when you're moving into new territory. And over time, those small decisions, the ones that felt insignificant in the moment, begin to compound. That one no to something that drained you frees up space for a yes to something that fuels you, that 1 hour you protect every day for yourself, no matter how inconvenient it seems, grows into weeks of clarity, months of growth, years of transformation. And then, almost without realizing it, you start to see the new script taking shape. Your work feels different because it finally aligns with your values instead of contradicting them. Your relationships feel lighter because they're built on honesty instead of pretending. Even the way you see yourself begins to shift. You no longer feel like an actor stuck in someone else's play. You feel like the author. And here's the part that hits hardest. The more you live this way, the more you realize how much of your old life was never really yours to begin with. And strangely, instead of grieving it, you feel grateful, because it proves something profound: how powerful one choice can be. One line in a book, one moment of clarity, one decision to pick up the pen, one refusal to keep reciting the lines of the old script. That's the long-term shift, not instant perfection, not overnight success, but a steady, undeniable transformation, a new identity built one choice at a time. And it changes not only what you do, but who you are. And now it all comes down to you. Because this isn't just my story. This is yours too. The line doesn't care who you are, where you've been, or what stage of life you're in. It only asks you one thing: will you keep living someone else's script, or will you finally write your own? Your turn to rewrite. Up until now, I've been telling you my story. The book I picked up, the line that shook me awake, the way it haunted me until I could no longer live the same way. But the truth is, this isn't just about me. This is about you. Because a line like this doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to anyone who's brave enough to face it and let it break through the lies they've been living. The line was this: you are living someone else's script unless you choose to write your own. Simple, unshakable, inescapable. And now it's staring right back at you. So let me ask you, whose script have you been living? Be honest with yourself for a moment. Think about the work you do, the hours you give away, the way you define success. Did you really choose all of that? Or were those lines handed to you? Did you write that story? Or have you been performing in one that was written long before you even realized you had a choice? Look closely at the life you've built. How much of it reflects your deepest desires, and how much of it reflects the expectations of parents, teachers, friends, bosses, and strangers who don't even know your heart? That's the mirror this line holds up. And it's not easy to look into it, because once you do, you can't hide from the truth. And here's where the tension comes in, because maybe you've already felt it. Maybe for years there's been a quiet voice in you whispering that something isn't right. You've felt the weight of a life that doesn't quite fit. You've felt the urge to break free, to do something bold, to live a story that's yours. But every time it rises, you've buried it. You've told yourself it's not the right time. You've told yourself you're not ready. You've told yourself you'll get to it later. But later is the most dangerous word in the world. Later becomes years. Later becomes decades. Later becomes a life that was never yours to begin with. And one day, if you keep waiting, you wake up to find the pages almost gone, the story almost over, and the realization that you never once picked up the pen. That's the tragedy of living someone else's script. You don't even notice the loss until it's too late. But here's the truth, and here's the payoff. You don't have to let that happen. Not anymore. Not now. Because right here, in this moment, you have a choice. You can take the pen back, you can tear up the lines that don't belong to you. You can stop reciting someone else's words and start creating your own. No permission needed, no approval required, no waiting for the perfect moment. The moment is now, and it doesn't have to start with something huge. It starts with one choice, 1 hour where you think for yourself, one decision that aligns with your heart instead of their expectations, one step that feels terrifying but honest. And once you take that step, the story begins to change. Slowly at first, then faster, and then one day you realize you've stopped performing and started living. So let me ask you again, what's the part of your life that feels borrowed? What's the script you've been reciting out of fear, out of habit, out of someone else's design? And what would happen if you let it go? Imagine for a moment that the story was blank again and you had the pen. What would you write? Who would you be? How would your days look if they were completely yours? Because your life is a book. Every sunrise is another page. And whether you realize it or not, the pen has been in your hand the entire time. The only question is this: will you finally start writing your own story, or will you let the old script finish it for you?